But as we get started, I wanted to make mention of I want to start us with a celebration. And okay, Jareen, when you did that, you you wiped out my screen. Here, okay, I'm going to do this.
Sorry about that. I hope it's
let me pull my notes down here, and I'm going to pull Zoom back up there.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Thank you.
We have electronic dozy-dos here now that we have to do.
Is that okay?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
So one of the, when we first began the conference in 2015, we presented an Outstanding Achievement in Autism in Georgia award. And we have done that each year for the past, for the past 5 years, but this will be our 6th presentation. So the award has been given to someone from Georgia who has made a contribution, and those contributions have taken many forms. They have been scientists, clinicians, service providers, advocates, organizers, and we feel that and many times actually people fill more than one of those roles as they do their work and they live their lives. We have been pleased, and I just want to mention some of the previous awardees. Our first award was given to Marshallyn Jurgen Alsop of the CDC, developmental pediatrician and medical epidemiologist. Our second award was given to Dr. Leslie Rubin. Dr. Rubin was the moderator yesterday, one of the co-moderator of the panel of developmental pediatrician who's worked with literally thousands of families in Georgia. Our third recipient was Gregory Aboud. Gregory is a professor at Georgia Tech, the father of 2 sons with autism, and the founder of the Atlanta Autism Consortium. Our fourth awardee was Kathy Rice, who is now the director of the Emory Autism Center and has previously with the CDC and has been responsible for the delivery of both the study and delivery of clinical services to folks with autism. And last year we had the distinct honor of awarding the Outstanding Achievement Award to Claire Dees. Claire is the founder of the Spectrum Autism Support Group. 2 years ago, we started a tradition that we had the previous awardee present the award to the current awardee. And so I have the pleasure then of asking Claire Dees to take the virtual podium to present this year's award.
Thank you so much. I am Claire Dees, Director of Spectrum Autism Support Group, and I am so pleased and honored to have the opportunity to present this year's award, the 2020 Autism Conference and Expo of Georgia Outstanding Achievement Award to Dr. David Gast. Dr. Gast is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Communications, Sciences, and Special Education at the University of Georgia. He's an internationally recognized educator and researcher. He's a scholar of single case design as a research method and in its application in real-world settings. During his career, Dr. Gast conducted numerous single case research design studies on instructional methods for children on the autism spectrum and those with intellectual disabilities, resulting in over 150 articles and book chapters. He is the author, with Dr. Jennifer Ledford, of Single Case Research Methodology and Special Education and Behavioral Sciences, now in its 3rd edition, which has been translated recently into Chinese, and an Arabic version is in process. Dr. Gast is a teacher of teachers, training dozens of future special educators who in turn work with hundreds of students across Georgia and the nation. As a part of their degree programs, his students were required to conduct applied research studies in public classrooms, often their own, and to also provide a variety of consultation and training to parents, teachers, and related service professionals. Dr. Dass was able to recruit and retain motivated and talented students who appreciated the importance of applied research conducted in authentic educational settings. Many of his students' research projects were published in professional and referred journals, making further contributions to the field. Critically for his students and the field, Dr. Gast has been true to his behaviorist roots in his unwavering stance on the vital importance of measurement, data, and employment of rigorous scientific methods to move the field forward, both in academia and in the public classroom. I have to say that I used to present in some of his seminars. I was grateful to be invited. It's been over 15 years ago, but he actually helped with the federal personnel preparation grants. And I just remember how gracious he was to allow the parent perspective to come to his students. And I just remember he had such a quick wit and sense of humor and just a passion for making a difference. I took liberty to ask one of the teachers of some of his autism courses who introduced me to Dr. Gast to share a bit of her memories of working with Dr. Gast. In 2003, Dr. David Gast at UGA heard about the huge numbers of students with autism in the Gwinnett County Public Schools and asked to see the program. At the time, Dr. Deanna Luscre was the lead teacher for the Gwinnett Autism Program. Having read Dr. Gast's research studies with moderate and severe populations of individuals with disabilities, she welcomed the opportunity to give the superstar of special education a tour of her autism classes. So they spent a day visiting children with autism and speaking to their teachers. And at the end of the day, she said, David asked her, "What do you need for your program?" Dr. Luscre responded by telling David that she became the coordinator for autism services in Gwinnett County Public Schools in 1996 and discovered that applicants for autism teaching positions, though recent graduates, had no more preparation for this wonderfully challenging group of students than she had in 1975. In 2002, she had surveyed Gwinnett County autism teachers and found that only 3 out of 62 had pre-service training in autism. Numbers of children made eligible for autism services in Gwinnett between 96 and 2002 had increased from 48 to 700. She learned that sending teachers into autism classes unprepared needed to change. This was just the kind of challenge that David Gast thrived on. And so he utilized his research expertise, and with Dr. Luscre's added experience in autism, they wrote the COPPA grant, Collaborative Personnel Preparation in Autism, which began in 2003 and eventually graduated 3 student cohorts. Dr. Luscre was asked to teach the first autism course for the class, and this year, in the first year, Dr. Gast attended the weekly meetings, and they were in the process of reviewing common teaching strategies such as social skills stories aimed at teaching appropriate social behavior to students with high-functioning autism. During the second class, Dr. Gast had a lot to say about how social stories had an absence of research-based support, et cetera, and this is an example of why we need documented studies. And Dr. Luscre says one student, who will remain unnamed, raised her hand and said, "I have a social story I would like to read." The name of her story was entitled Little Davy. This can't be happening, Dr. Luscre thought, but her story went something like this. Little Davy is a student who has inappropriate social behaviors in the classroom. He interrupts the teacher and makes many comments without being called upon. Davy should try to raise his hand to ask a question and should try to not make comments without being asked. We will be proud when Davy is able to do this. Other students were looking pained and down at their nose. Dr. Luscre was a little frozen at the time, and after a moment of uncomfortable silence, he and she made eye contact, she said, and with a half grin, he said, "Okay, go ahead, Dr. Luscre." And so she did. David was gracious and tolerant to her teacher, she says, and for 9 years they worked together with outspoken, talented, and bright teachers like this storyteller on behalf of students with autism, making a difference for not just students with autism, but their teachers and their families. Dr. Luscre says he's a doer of good things and a supporter of all who want to help. And she sends her congratulations to you for your well-deserved honor. David recently retired, but he continues to be an active community member in Athens. Notably, he continues to volunteer his time in a classroom with students with autism, with hospice, and in delivering Meals on Wheels. Students remember him as fiercely intelligent, incredibly helpful, and always up for an intellectual discussion. So, with this audience of self-advocates, family members, professionals, and researchers as witness, we present the 2020 Outstanding Achievement Award to Dr. David Gast. Congratulations, Dr. Gast. You can show your award if you'd like.
I will. Yes, thank you, Claire. I appreciate this very much. And I must say, I'm honored and quite surprised, actually, for the recognition of the work that I've been able to do over the years. First, I want to say, you mentioned the Davy story. And I know the author of that story, that social story. And that happens to be Dawn Henning. I know that. One of my favorite students, a little sassy, but I like sassy. That's good. But I do appreciate that. And you mentioned also Deanna, which I want to elaborate on in a minute. But I think the first thing that I want to do is to draw attention to the great group of graduate students that I was able to work with at the University of Georgia, most of whom were master's students. And I really enjoyed working with the teachers and other related personnel in introducing them to single case research methodology, as well as sharing the information that I had regarding kids on the autism spectrum. I should mention right up front too, many of my students, and I see Michael Moyer is in the audience, that I was also known as Dr. Dread. And I think that was also a Dawn Henning, possibly something that actually stuck over the years. But again, my students that I worked with were absolutely excellent, and I could not have been more pleased with the cadre of students that I had. The other thing I want to mention is that there were two very important people to me when I came to Georgia. Two people who really assisted in what I was able to do once coming here in 1990. One was Kent Logan, and Kent, and I knew Kent from back in the day, like back in the early 80s. And so when I came to Georgia, he and I reconnected, and we had a federal research grant to study individuals with profound and multiple disabilities. And that was all conducted in classrooms, and an extraordinarily challenging research grant. And Kent was quite amazing, and I learned a lot from him. But the big thing that Kent did for me was he is the one who introduced me to Dr. Deanna Luscre. Deanna is the one who absolutely changed my way of thinking in terms of how kids on the spectrum could be educated within the classroom. She was just an extremely important person in my career. And it seemed like it was more than 9 years, because our grant ran from 2002 to 2015. But she was just an outstanding contributor and collaborator. And I have to mention this, that it's interesting that being at the University of Georgia, the two people that I had the greatest contact with and who were instrumental in the work that I was able to do while here in Georgia, both were Georgia State University graduates. And so it was interesting to connect with the Georgia State people. And both of the people that I connected with were students of Dr. Paul Alberto. And I just want to make a comment about Paul Alberto. I'd known him from back in the late 70s, and just an amazing guy, fun guy, very direct, very bright. And I was aware of the contributions he made across the state of Georgia when I was at the University of Kentucky. So it was really nice to reconnect with his former students and to be able to do things here in the state of Georgia, you know, with in the state of Georgia with them. Claire, you mentioned the COPA project, and that really was one that was extremely challenging and also very rewarding, in that we were able to prepare a lot of teachers who were specifically educated to work with kids on the autism spectrum. And that grant had really three objectives. One was to prepare the teachers in specific evidence-based practices related to kids on the autism spectrum, but also to work with families and to be able to provide in-service training to a variety of people, not only families, but to other professionals. That was all part of the objective. And as you mentioned in your introduction, was the requirement in this 2-year master's degree program to conduct an applied research study in the classrooms in which they were teaching. So it was a wonderful experience. And again, very proud of the students that were graduated and the impact that they've had. So many of them now are in administrative positions in Metro Atlanta, and others in other counties, as well as some in other states. So Deanna and I are very proud of the students that we graduated. If I may, I'd just like to go back to when I first was introduced to children with autism. And that was back in 1970. I mean, I'm sure there are people in the audience that 1970, they weren't even born, but in 1970, I happened to work at a psychiatric hospital in Kansas City, Missouri. And at that hospital, they had an adolescent unit. And I was fortunate enough to be on a team with a gentleman named Austin Delorier. He was a Freudian, psychoanalytic type guy, but he was an extremely engaging guy. And he introduced me to a young lady, probably 12, 13 years old, on the adolescent unit, who I remember, beautiful young girl, standing in the corner, body rocking, nonverbal, totally not engaged with things that were going on in the environment. And she absolutely intrigued me, which got me to visit what few programs there were for children with autism back then. And most of those were in church basements. But I also went to the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, which was a very Freudian psychoanalytic approach. And watching these kids with autism, I think back then they were more referred to as childhood schizophrenia, and just totally intrigued by the population, the behaviors that I observed, and the rather strange interventions that were being used with them. So it struck me that there had to be a better way to work with these kids. And I realized at the University of Kansas, in the Department of, it was Human Development, Child Psych, Child Development, that there was a whole group of faculty who were behavioral psychologists who were studying kids with autism in natural settings. They had classrooms that were set up. They also were had centers at the state hospitals. And so I applied for the doctoral program there. And I was very fortunate to get in, because as an undergraduate, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. But I was admitted to that doctoral program and learned a lot about how to really look at practical problems that these kids were emitting, and strategies that would be appropriate for applied settings, preschool classrooms, public school classrooms, and also working with families on how to prepare teachers to teach kids, parents, getting parents to learn the strategies for working with their children at home. But there were two things that faculty at UK or Kansas emphasized throughout the program. And this was pretty much across the faculty. One was that for those of us that were going to the university to teach and to do research, was to partner and collaborate with practitioners, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a clinician, whether it was a family member, but the importance of staying in touch with the practitioners, the people that were in the field. And the second thing that they emphasized, and I can't say this strongly enough, is that for those of us at the university, that we should remember that our students at the university were not and are not our primary, should not be our primary focus. Our primary focus should be the children with whom our students work and their parents. And I think throughout my career, I've tried to focus on that, where my students, my graduate students, yes, I was interested in them, but I was more interested in their ability to learn the skills that were necessary to work effectively with the children in the field that they would subsequently work with. So that's all I have to say, other than I appreciate the recognition and I'm honored. And I know there are people out there that are doing great work, and I look forward to seeing that work being done by others in the years ahead. But Claire, thank you. And for those at the center too, thank you very much for the recognition.